Well, hello, everyone. Happy end of February, almost leap day, 2024. I was hoping for a minute that it was so that I could really differentiate this CELT publication or the CELT recording to say I'm one of the only ones probably held on a leap year. But my name is Jill Pippin. I am the Dean for the Division of Extended Learning here at SUNY Oswego, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some research I've completed recently about higher education design for non-traditional students. The first thing that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is the higher education landscape. So you may or may not have seen this. It's a pretty drastic image, actually. But the landscape of higher education has become increasingly complex over the past 10, 15 years. For those that are long in the tooth and have been in the higher education industry for some time, you'll know that. But based on organizational complexities from funding issues, budgetary issues, but enrollment as well as seeing a lot of folks retire who've been in senior leadership positions. So you see a lot of turnover in terms of presidencies and all the other vice presidents and all the other positions underneath that. You see environmental challenges for different types of institutions that they're having to grapple with. But in a huge impact, you have the decrease in birth rates that happened after the Great Recession of 2008. Which is now resulting in manifesting itself in a sharply declining number of traditional age college students. And this actually is set to begin, I believe, this next coming year, the 24-25 year is when that is about to start. So if you're in higher education right now, you know that it is becoming very much more complex and difficult to attain enrollment goals, particularly in the Northeast of the country, because we have so many institutions of higher learning. That's where many of them started. So there's a density of institutions, but also we see that decline in student of traditional age. And as you'll see from the colorful graph, the forecasted growth or decline in college-going students. Now, this is over a larger time frame, but this only gets more drastic. I really like this image because what it shows is, particularly in the Northeast, you're seeing just based on demographics alone, a challenge here. But this was specifically, these two charts were pulled from the New York State Comptroller Financial Condition Report. And it just shows you pretty drastically how enrollment in general, full-time equivalent enrollment in New York State alone, has been declining since 2013-14, again, 10 years ago, thereabouts. So we have seen just overall macro vision decrease of enrollment in traditional age students. Privates have kind of gone down, but it's publics that are really being hit the most. Also, you see down in the bottom right, the percentage change in national and state enrollment, all sectors is continuing to go down. So this continues to go down even further, specific to the percentage change. So New York versus national instead of public versus private. So that current state of higher education is important to remember. There's this crisis in confidence in higher education and the question about return on investment. Why should people have high loans? What does it provide them, particularly when we're in this time where minimum wage continues to increase and you can get all these benefits and so on from working at Dunkin' Donuts or in some of the gas stations, for goodness sakes. So you're seeing this crisis in confidence, which is shaking some, especially of our current generation's confidence in why would I go to college instead of just going right straight out and making money, in some cases more than what their parents might even be making, and if they're in underserved or minority groups or in poverty. You also have, but at the same point, you have personal and generational benefits that are empirically studied and proven that going to college, colleges are engines of equity. They create social mobility, not just for the individual, but for their families, and therefore amassing generational wealth that has a multiplier effect on a family's family tree and their projection. So you have this kind of incongruence here. Okay, so what? Well, despite the decline of overall or traditional, what I'll call traditional enrollment, that means students who are coming on campus living, 18 to 22-year-olds, 18 to 21-year-olds. But then there is a projected increase in demand for non-traditional student enrollment. Regional comprehensive universities have the opportunity, but are not attracting adult students to apply and enroll in baccalaureate degrees. So here's another stat. Traditional students are going to decline 12% over the next decade. But in 2019, only 36% of Americans aged 25 and over had a 4-year degree. And if you're like me, you're thinking of your parents, or if you're a little bit younger, maybe your grandparents, and you think, okay, but they're not going to go back to college. That's true. But 36, that was a bit of a shock to me when I first encountered this. There's also the new future of work. What is work going to be like as workers reskill and upskill in order to keep a job or be able to move up their ladder at their own career or change a career? There is the impacts of automation, globalization, so the rise of the global middle class, artificial intelligence, which we're all seeing because that has burst upon the scene and become much more ingrained in how we do our work and will continue to do so. So how does that impact what education and higher education has to do, not just in the classroom for traditional students, but perhaps for serving adults? At the same point, our institutional pathways, programs, and all of our support services directly influences their persistence, retention, and degree completion. That makes sense because that's the same for our traditional population. So let's talk about, why are we talking about adults again? We talked about the decline. There's some stats there. This was very specific. So SUNY enrollment has declined 19.7, just talking SUNY. But SUNY and CUNY's enrollment declined since fall of 19 alone. So the first stat was since 2011. Since fall 19, at the pandemic years, it fell even more. Yet at the same point, it's increasingly difficult to build that meaningful and successful life in the US without a four-year degree. So there is increasing degree completion among adults, have those important ramifications for individuals and society. There are 40 million people in the US. So to take that first stat in 2019, about 36% of them having a 4-year degree, I'm going to continue and say, all right, so let's talk about those who are potentially potentially motivated to return to college based on their career. 40 million people in the US between the age of 18 and 50 have some college credit and no credential. So we're increasing our understanding of how many people are out there. We're not talking about adults who've never gone to college before. We're talking about adults who sometimes have more than half a degree completed or have all but 1 or 2 classes that they've accomplished, but they have no credential. And the world of work does require those specific skill sets, but also college credentials. They use them in terms of how to look at applicants, in terms of how to allow people to progress through their promotional levels. And therefore, adult college enrollment age 35 and up is expected to rise to 3.3 million by 2028. So that's the expected demand that everyone has been talking about in terms of adult learners. So what about SUNY Oswego? Obviously, we have a type, an institutional type. And when I started this study, I wanted to make sure that I used our type. This was important because I first started with our Carnegie classification, of which we were a master's granting institution or master's degree granting institution. The six classifications that Carnegie uses are based on the type of the most likely conferred degree. That's it. So Carnegie has been under fire for years for being the least accurate in categorizing types of institutions, but they have also been trying to rectify that. So as of, I believe it was November, they announced that they are refining their Carnegie classifications to include social and economic factors with ACE. And that's pretty exciting, but that didn't help me for my study because there is such a difference between, you could have public and versus private. You could have R1s, although most of them are doctoral granting institutions, but you could have all sorts of different types of colleges that have different types of specialties, and yet still be lumped in with them if you're only using Carnegie classifications. So I looked into the research, and there are quite a lot of other different types. You could liberal arts institutions, LAIs. You could talk about four-year institutions, broad access institutions, regional comprehensive universities, comprehensive institutions, and each of them had research that was trying to define what they were. And I tell you, this was a bit of a rabbit hole for me because I didn't understand the complexity that's out there when you're trying to find a grouping of institution. Most often, and Oswego does this because I've been party to it, we talk about we know our own peers. So it's kind of peer-to-peer grouping is what seems to work well. And I think we've seen that from middle states and some other things, is you find one that has enough of the corresponding types of enrollment, and you list a number of factors, and then you use those as a peer institution. But that doesn't define who you are. And that's important to me because I'm looking at the mission. How does your institutional type drive the mission of the institution? So broad access institutions, so the three up here, the ones that I thought best may have aligned best with SUNY Oswego. Broad access institutions are non-elite, public and private though. They offer admission to most students and offer no or few doctoral degrees, okay. Regional comprehensive universities, you have broad access to education. The institutions was founded to promote civic and economic engagement. They're stewards of place and usually sustainably anchor a region. And then you have comprehensive institutions writ large, which provide access, affordability, but the emphasis is on instruction over research, and their regional hubs. So there's more detail, but what I finally decided that Oswego fit best with was the regional comprehensive universities, the RCU, because in Oswego, we are a steward of place. We are sustainably anchoring the region. And if you look at our history, which is the next slide, we started out as a teacher's college. So we talked about, we were serving adults. Those individuals who were getting ready to be a teacher were adults. And so we started out right with Edward Austin Sheldon in the very beginning, being a teacher's college of adults. In the 30s, just like many other institutions like us, we started to do more veteran education because, or maybe more 40s, perhaps after the GI Bill, and people came back from World War II. But then in the 80s, I'm jumping quite a bit there, but evening and correspondence courses became something that Oswego did. In the 90s, we were very proud that we're one of the first SUNYs to offer online courses. And so in the 2010s or thereabouts, we were starting to offer online completion degrees. And Syracuse campus, we had a spot there in 2008, and we just started to offer some courses. The aim for that Syracuse campus was to provide access to adult and non-traditional students. 2015, we received branch campus designation. 2016, we started working on the prior learning assessment policy and really wrote that down. In 2020, we approved the establishment of this new type of award called micro-credentials. Prior learning assessment and micro-credentials are both very adult oriented, because prior learning, of course, looks at the life experiences and the work experiences that can be equated to college level learning outcomes so that they could be seen as equivalent to college credit. Thus, and of course, adults have the most opportunity to have those experiences to be evaluated in the first place. Micro-credentials are the industry or higher education, well, the higher education industry's answer to short-term training, but with the integrity and with all of the encumbrances and expertise of faculty to create smaller credentials that are overseen by faculty versus kind of non-credit trainings that are much more seminar type or workshop-y based. In 2022, we approved the Integrative Professional Studies Degree, which you're going to hear about more in a minute because it was the base of this case study, that was directly created for those with some college credit, no degree, those adults that would return. And then as of this very year, we're offering full online degrees, not just completion degrees, and online minors. So we have this huge base of serving adults and having our opportunity to serve our region. In Vision 4040, our president has talked about growth in serving the some college, no credential audience, as well as increasing the number of micro-credentials, online programs, Syracuse-based programs, and workforce training. So Oswego fits. The IPS degree, the Integrative Professional Studies Degree, I'm just going to go really fast. The link is there. If you'd like to learn more about it, there's a webpage that has the information. But as I said, it was created and launched in summer of 2022. It's offered both online and in person. It is both a BA or a BS. It is intentionally able to be customized by a student and with under strict heavy advisement to create an interdisciplinary thematic program that fits their needs. But it does require them to fit within 5 different thematic areas that are informed by that future of work that we talked about before. Again, in kind of taking into account the effects of artificial intelligence, automation, and globalization. So, and prior learning assessment is part of it, as well as micro-credentials, which are embedded within the 5 areas of concentration. These slides are here. You'll be able to look at these more often on the recording if you like, or you can go online and look. But basically, the bones of the program include 5 core courses, of which there's an intro and a capstone course, which include a portfolio process, and the very base pieces that we require people to have. And then again, requirement areas. They get to choose at least one of the requirement areas to concentrate in, so that then, as part of their capstone, they can share with potential employers how they bring their skills to the future of work. The outcomes of the program are there as well, but again, they're online as well. So I've been talking about adult students and non-traditional students for a while, and I think that everyone has their own idea of what that means. And it was important for me to define exactly what they are, and then the characteristics of who they are before doing a case study and really looking into more qualitative information about that group. So non-traditional students are always called all different names. You could be calling them adult student, and you've already heard me use them interchangeably. Some people call them post-traditional, the SCND, some credit, no degree, or some college, no credential. There are a lot of terms for them, but they have at least one of these characteristics. They're at least 24 years or older. They're financially independent. They have others that they care for. It could be their parents, their aging parents. It could be their children, or both. They've had a gap between high school and college, or attended part-time because they're working. They either are actively working, or they stop to work or have a family. And often they have earned some college credit, but no degree or credential. So here's another fun stat. According to, where did I get this from? Is it National Clearinghouse and CCR? Yes. Approximately 2 out of 5 students at colleges already, any kind of college, are adult students anyway, over the past 40 years. So people in my field of work often sit and chuckle and say, you know, there is really no traditional versus non-traditional student anymore, because you have so many adults that are already starting to go back to college for various reasons. So it's kind of interesting to see when you talk about military veterans coming back and using their benefits, when you talk about those who are in graduate programs as well, that does count here. But at the same time, the dichotomy is that assessments of overall college success in the US only measure traditional student information. So for example, first time, full-time, retention, the funding models for our institutions are based on that. Well, often adults or non-traditional students are taking classes part-time, or perhaps their goal is not for a full degree. Perhaps their goal is for something smaller, hence the micro-credential discussion, of course. But our US measurements of success for institutions and the things we report on are very much oriented toward traditional students. And then further, our institutions are overwhelmingly designed for the young adult phase of life. So our application processes, financial aid, for example, until 2 years ago now, it might be 1 year now, there was no financial aid for part-time study. And so this audience was not set up and supported at an institutional or even just an industry-wide level. Our instructional approaches were very much oriented toward traditional students, 3 days a week for an hour and a half or something like that. And our student supports were not available to remote individuals, or perhaps at times or in ways that our adults could access them. And I want to bring in the science. Brain development occurs all the way up until age 25. So what's happening at that point between the ages of 20 or 18 and 25, they're still developing the ability to process pros and cons of decision making. Dr. Croyle, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, also referenced me to this, the expectations of behavior model. That states that if society treats you different, then you don't have the executive function or practice to make reliable decisions. So if you are not treated as if you are responsible for yourself, or that you have all these other responsibilities, then you're not able to function and practice in a different way. So the example here that she gave me, and I love it, is the difference between a 21-year-old student who is a traditional student, someone who came straight from their high school, was a residential person, and they're learning about how to work with and live with other people of different backgrounds and all this kind of stuff, versus a 21-year-old military veteran who has been responsible for various types of maybe covert operations, or at least having different responsibilities. They're very different in the classroom, and they have very different expectations that society's put on them, and so therefore they are able to behave differently. So it's not just about brain development, it's also about the expectations of behavior on the individual. But due to their life experience and age, the mature students do possess significantly more developed skills in resilience, emotional regulation, and problem-solving skills. This is from a study that was conducted over or as a result of the COVID pandemic, where they were comparing the adult students to traditional age students and how they were able to handle their studies and continuing to study while the pandemic occurred. So non-traditional students had different motivations to enroll, different barriers for retention, and benefits of completion. Obviously, they want to enroll, first of all, to attain knowledge, of course, but mainly to progress in their careers, and in some cases to contribute to the community. It may not be their number one or even number two thing, but having that ability to contribute to their community and having more civic engagement is in there. They want to see that their study is going to have application to their workplace. They need financial pathways. They're concerned about instructional quality because they don't want to spend their time and effort without getting a return on investment for their money. And they want to make sure, and they need to have some confidence in their success. After a break out of school, they sometimes are a little bit unsure that they can do it, that they can get in there with the young ones and still be learning and active in the classroom. But once they have confidence in their success, this is how, they're very motivated. Once they get in class, the problem is that ineffective policies, programs, advising, course scheduling, things get in the way of their ability to move forward. It's not always institutional, it's their own life and their own other demands on them. But a lack of student services, direct communication that talks to them as adults, as opposed to as a younger person who is living on campus, for example, is seen as a barrier. They're reinforced that they're different, that they're not as important to the institution. So making sure that there are financial pathways, making sure that things like childcare are in place are important. And then benefits of completion for adults, even at the adult level, there are empirical studies about the fact that there is a longer life expectancy for those that have achieved a bachelor's degree. Their lifetime earnings, of course, are much higher. Their ability to attain and keep well-paid jobs is higher. So therefore, the social mobility, the resilience, and the upskilling not just advances themselves and their family, but then also in a macro view, it advances society. So what we want to do is create a sense of belonging for them, which helps them to have academic success as well. The theories this study was based on are those of you who know andragogy, know Malcolm Knowles. He's kind of the father of adult learning theory. You've all heard the word pedagogy, and if you know your Latin, you know that is the science of teaching and learning for children. And again, remember, adults are 25 or and above, excuse me. So this is andragogy. So that's the science and teaching and learning for adults. And so his point, this is a subset of some of his theory, but he basically said that adults, the how and why of how adults learn is important and are huge components for the effectiveness of anyone who seeks to serve them. Vincent Tinto, who actually is from SU, had a long-standing theory of, first it was his theory of retention, and it really started looking at traditional students, but actually then he, in 1998, revised it to be the theory of student persistence, and he talked a lot about, specifically about adult learners and non-traditional students, talking about the environmental factors that the institution provides and how they affect students, their experiences and their academic integrations. A couple more pieces from literature. We know that non-traditional students spend considerable energy weighing factors before deciding to return to school. Yet at the same point, they're so it takes them a lot to commit to a school, but then once they do, they're the ones that are most prone to attrition. I'm gonna talk about the other piece, motivated by professional development, cognitive interest, and immediate life applications. They consider carefully the cost of academic programs, the choice of program, the financial aid options, how flexible and accelerated the course formats are, and they have to figure out how they're going to navigate the inter-role conflict that they have with all of their different identities to be able to fit this into their life. So they have significant challenges they have to overcome in order to enroll and persist. So that's all the setup to my qualitative descriptive case study of a SUNY Oswego non-traditional students enrolled in the Integrative Professional Studies Degree program that occurred last year. So for those researchers in the house, the quick rundown of my approach, it was purposive criterion sampling of students that were enrolled in the IPS programs. They were all aged over 25. They all had some college and no bachelor's degree before they started. I interviewed. It's important to note that I did qualitative study as opposed to quantitative, because in this field there is significant quantitative work and reference, but pretty much everybody talks about the fact that there needs to be more qualitative work to tell the story of the students and to be able to allow them to have a voice. The age range of the people I talked to were ages 32 to 50, but their median age was 38 and a half. They were all white. I will say that there was no diversity in terms of ethnicity in there, but they were 50% male and 50% female. Their average gap was 12 and a half years out of school. And they only had to take they only had been enrolled 3 or fewer semesters. So that may or may not have affected the answers they gave me. I did individual semi-structured interviews and created a comprehensive thematic summary for it with the stories that illustrated the lived experiences. So the research questions, I had 3 research questions. The first was, what encourages them to apply? And the results are this: that everything they apply for practical reasons, hands down, done, practical reasons. They wanted preparation for advancement. They wanted it to be pertinent to their professional goals. It needed to have a planned path to finish, because they're not here for ambiguity. They want to make sure they can complete, and they want to make sure that prior learning is integrated into into the mix if possible. So next, I'm gonna kind of point out for each of those 4 bullets. Under preparation for advancement, every single one of them said that they wanted to advance their careers specific to their own professional goals. And here's a couple of the examples. I love this first example. I want the degree because being able to check that box will keep you from being rejected by artificial intelligence before a person ever even sees your resume. This is completely and utterly true. We know this at SUNY Oswego because we have an automated system. And if you don't meet the qualifications, you're not forwarded on for the committee to look at you. This other one was a little heartbreaking. He lost his job during the first week of the pandemic. And he felt that going back to college was very important because in his perception, it was not so easy to just get rid of those sorts of people. And then another person worked swing shift. And he knew that someday down the road, he wanted to start a family, wanted to try and position himself to join a management team and get on days so that he could have work-life balance. So you could see it very directly was specific to their advancement. Then it was also pertinent to their life goals, customized to optimize their time and learning outcomes, and have it immediately apply to work. They wanted it and they loved it. They literally made the program to fit exactly how they wanted the outcome. The focus is on what work is going to be, as opposed to here's how you do a job. So this second comment is in regard to the fact that the curriculum in the core courses is all about the future of work and opening folks' eyes and letting them understand a little bit about how automation, artificial intelligence, and globalization are going to be affecting the work world and already are. So giving them tools that they can therefore then go out and talk about themselves and what they know was huge for this one student. Another one talked about, I'm not just taking this class to check the box so I can get a degree. There's actual stuff that I can apply in my day-to-day. How I conduct myself at work, how I can conduct myself with my team, because this person was a supervisor, and things I can share with them to help them develop. So this person was talking about that applicability of the learning. And then another person talked about the micro-credentials that are part of the IPS degree. It's an interesting component. And now it's broader. You can focus and have geared interests toward what you want to do. So while at this point, none of them had been enrolled in any particular micro-credential, that's part of our own infrastructure, that we only have one that's available right now within the micro-credential pathway. They loved the idea that it was there and found value in it. Planned path. Obviously, that just means the fastest path to their goal. The academic planning coordinator, you're going to hear about more quite a bit. But basically, they would plot out options. And our students said, my APC said, this is going to take, we're going to take all your credits, and this is going to be your fastest line to be done by December. This is what you should take. And yep, thanks. That's all I want. That's all I needed. Another person, it's there and I can see it mapped out. For me, it's not just like some random, maybe in the next 5 years, I can actually do this. And then the third example here, I was already enrolled in another program here at SUNY Oswego. And I was playing around with a what if button, and it showed me I could almost be done. So instead of taking 7 years worth of more classes at one class per semester, this person had 3 classes to take. And so for adults, even though program is interesting to them, it is not essential to all of them, because a lot of them are just afraid that they're not going to be able to complete because they have to move everything around in their life so much. So we as an institution are lucky that we have the IPS degree, in which we can still say that there is a governance approved, very well-designed program with integrity that allows adults to finish, not just a bag of credits and you're out the doors as soon as you hit 120. This is not a general bag of credits type of degree. This is a degree that works for adults and still has outcomes that work for them. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to start getting your eyes crossed, but I had a hard time chopping down my citations from some of their testimonials. And so I'm going to try to pick out things so that, and you can go back to the slide deck later to read them if you'd like. But prior learning integration was a huge thing that they kept talking about and saying either they were the beneficiary of being able to have prior learning, or not only that they got it, but they would want more because they felt like in their life, Many of them owned businesses or were heads of certain pieces of they were in production and were supervisors at a somewhat mid-level supervisor, and they felt like there were things that they could bring, and if it could count toward their degree, it would help them. So the first one, just to call it out, it wasn't like the work I'd already done wasn't worth it. I could integrate things. The second one, your institution took all of my 90 credits. I looked at another school. They only took 30 of my 90 credits. So nope, he didn't go there. The third quote, I do feel like a lot of my life experience and my work experience could be applied for credit. So that might be something you could do better. The last one is quite wordy, but I'll sum it up by saying this individual was actually a recipient of prior learning and didn't realize it, because he was waived out of a prerequisite for a comm studies class that he needed to graduate. And it was a huge thing for him, because he's looking at, less than a handful of classes for graduation. And he says, I have 17 years experience starting on the shop floor, now being an operations leader. I have 150 people underneath me and I'm responsible for things. So it would be lovely if you could have more assessment on work experience, credentials, work accomplishments, because there's a lot of stuff I've done and been fortunate enough to do that you can't really apply toward formal education. So that's important for us to think about moving forward. The second research question was, what empowered them to enroll? And the very first thing I'm going to say here is the students, or the people I interviewed, had a hard time differentiating between the decision to apply and the decision to enroll, because for them it was one and the same. Once they figured out that they were able to fit it into their schedules, that they could get it done, that it fit certain criteria. It was a reputable institution. They knew how they were going to pay for it. It was like all speed ahead. So there really isn't like a traditional student. There's a huge admission cycle where you're trying to bring them in and kind of court them to come here, and then they enroll, and then they keep enrolling. For adults, it was all together, one and the same. And they said that it had to be flexible and supported. That's what helps them to enroll and continue enrolling. And by flexible, we're talking about being accessible. So the demands and responsibilities and financial limitations do impact their ability to enroll. So that's something they need to navigate, but they also need flexibility in terms of timing, in terms of the types of teaching methods, the technology use, how often or reliable the courses are scheduled. And so I'm not going to go through all of these. There's way too many of these, but I'm going to try to cherry pick a couple of them. Part of it was about having the fortitude and resiliency we talked about earlier, that I haven't gone back to school for a while. I was not confident. Don't get discouraged. You can do it. Talking about being online is the only way that they were going to be able to do it, because they work and they have kids. Or some of them have different custody situations of kids. And so the weekend is the only time they can work. So asynchronous was the only option they had. Sometimes it was about, the bottom left is talking about the fact that you have made it so accessible for people, basically by being online. You don't have to be 18 years old and go live in a dorm to go to college now. So these were people who were so excited about the fact that you could do that. The final one in the bottom right, I thought was very notable, because it was a student who was upset by their instructor, who wasn't necessarily being accessible or flexible in terms of the assignments of work assignments. This was somebody who did have his kids during the week. He only does his stuff in the weekends. And he says, I have life. I have things to do during the week. So I need it to be flexible. It needs to be supported, as I said before, and that means personalized assistance. So this is where I'm going to talk a lot about our academic planning coordinators, but other areas of the institution as well, that were designed to provide support specifically for adults and for remote students. It's important to note too, as the third bullet states, 3 of them transferred from other institutions. due to their ineffective advising and unreliable course rotations. So we have to keep in mind too that these students, again, won't continue to enroll if we don't continue to offer these things, and we don't advise appropriately, and we don't provide the supports and the regularity that they need to progress. The academic planning coordinators talked about how wonderful it was. They compared it to how it was at other institutions that they enrolled in. One of them talked about the ASAP program, the Adult Student Persistence Program, or Assistance Program. Whoops, that's my own typo. They send emails out and talk about tips and things to help manage their schedule. And if you look toward the end of that quote, it's nice to have that reach out. Even as a non-traditional student, it's nice to know that people are paying attention and want to know that you are going to succeed in their program. So we're still, they're all humans, and they all want to make sure, they all want to know that they matter. The next page, some more quotes. Like I said, I'm going to overdo this a little bit, but they just couldn't say enough about how the academic planning coordinators in the Division of Extended Learning were talking about how they were able to put out, okay, here's plan A, here's plan B, here's plan C. Let's talk about what you want as a goal. Here are the ways it can do it, and this is the trade-offs. You may not be able to take this one class, or that might add an extra semester on. But at the same point, it's empowering the adults to be part of the solution and decide what's happening without having them try to sift through all the different components. I also want to make sure that I say the library was also cited as a really helpful ally here and support. Talking about providing them information when they needed it, and then making sure that it was the appropriate information the student needed. And then this one, like I said, huge, guys, sorry. I would have been more selective, but I had a hard time. This one talked about our tutoring. This person was taking Math 208 after 20 years from that level, away from that level of math, and was very much struggling. And he used the tutoring services here and just couldn't believe it. It was something he'd never taken advantage of as a traditional underclassman, had no experience with, was a little bit weary about doing it, or leery about doing it, I should say, and basically found it to be wonderful and couldn't say enough about how great it was. So the third research question is, what enables you to persist? You can see this picture of the mom on the laptop with the dad and the child in the background. That's very pertinent to this one. And you'll see in a bit, it's going to be about being intentional and committed. So the very first one is that helps them persist to completion is instructional design. And instructional design is written here. It does not just mean what our instructional designers do at this institution. It's about the importance of the faculty and the classroom experience. So it's more holistic than just, I just want to make sure people don't think I'm talking about only our IDs here at SUNY Oswego. It's about the package, that they get clear and timely feedback from the faculty. They want the good grades, so they'll put the time in, and they want the return on investment for all of their time and money invested. They're happy to do that, but that means they want to know so they can do better. So timely grading, they appreciated it. Down on the left, you'll see. They appreciated the fact that when they got feedback, they could actually bring it on in the next assignment, so that and they also said, you know, if you didn't give me feedback, then I can't do better in the next assignment. This is what we all want our students to do, right? To be responsible and integrate our feedback so the next assignment is better. So some of them had inconsistency on the feedback front, but the good news is that that is a huge part of what they're looking forward to. And this is what they want. They love having quick and fast communication with their instructors. That was huge. The other thing was group work. This came out as a theme. Many of them asked, please don't do group work. In particular, why they said it was because of their schedules, because group work usually requires doing things synchronously. And the problem is they work during the day, and if in a lot of these cases, they were combined with traditional age students who didn't work during the day and wanted to meet during the day, and may or may not have been as committed to their learning experience. And so one of the quotes in here says that, the adult student was very stressed out because the students weren't meeting, and it was due in 2 weeks, and they had the whole semester to get it done. Whereas this other one, there was another person who said these traditional students keep calling me and calling me during the week when I tell them I only work on the weekends. I don't have availability. I'm working, and I'm a single dad, and I have my kids during the week. So the incongruity of having non-traditional and traditional students in group work were of specific points of contention for these students and challenges. This one on the left basically gives the whole story about that father situation. He also had a scenario in which he had a class in which an assignment would be placed during the week and be due during the week, so that by the time he logged in, he had a 0, and he didn't even know that there was an assignment. Let's remember, adult students very much value and want that return on their investment. They value their grade. They're not here just to get a C. They're here to try to get the information that they can apply. And so this person was very upset by the fact that there wasn't a standard where all assignments are always viewable and only due on certain times, like Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So the last thing was, group projects. There's another one about group projects yet again. So you can look at that if you like. Another one is about online proctoring. I totally understand the need for academic integrity. I know with all the chat things coming out, there's a will, there's a way. People are going to find a way to try to scam the system. But as an adult student, trying to find the balance between making sure we have good academic integrity, so our degrees actually mean something, but also trying to be mindful, online proctoring isn't a viable option for adult learners because it's synchronous. Don't forget. And at this institution, I'm going to tell you right now, they also have to pay out of pocket for it, and it's very stressful. So his point was, this is incongruent with the fact that you have a degree that's tailored toward adult learners. So why would this be so rigid when the rest of this is so flexible and useful for adult learners? No, I'm good. I was gonna say, I didn't think I had more. I guess I did. Yes, part of it they suggested is professional development for the professors on how to do online stuff. You remember point in time last year, we were switching over to D2L. So that one I included basically to underscore the fact that we do need to have professional development, but I do want to give you that little a caveat about the context. But they did say the biggest thing is getting professors to understand what adult learners actually are and what online learning is. Because life becomes a struggle for a lot of non-traditional students. Things happen and all of a sudden you step away. So that was, that I thought was a lot of different quotes that you can again look at further if you like. But I'm gonna move on to the last piece on research question number 3. Being committed was massive to their ability to persist. And what I mean by that is they are determined to persevere. They have grit. The 6 that I talked to, I can't say that this is representative of everyone, of course, because these are the ones who are there and enrolled. But the ones that I talked to is they said, first of all, you just got to do it. Don't get discouraged. The more you do it, you can make sure it's part of your life. You get used to the workload. But the biggest thing was this one on the top right. Of course, at this point, I know I'll complete because I already put a lot into it, money and time. So life happened for the Brown entry here. She had her kids, she had her business. She's a divorcee at this time, and she was saying that she was just going back to finish this because it was important to her. She wanted to finish what she started. This person made a pact with herself because life's going to keep getting in the way. I'm close, I'm almost there. But the person on the far right says, and this was another one of those surprising things that came out of qualitative research. I hate to say this, but I don't feel that a bachelor's degree is all that impressive, which is why it's embarrassing for me that I don't already have one. I know that there are people who will assume things about your intelligence or capabilities based on whether you have one or not, and I just don't want that to ever be brought into question about me. This shame was something that came out, that our adult students are coming back to finish a bachelor's degree. They're ashamed to be in class, and this was not just one person. This was a running thing. They all felt like this was something that they failed at in the game of life, that they didn't get it done when they were supposed to have. And therefore, it makes people question their intelligence, and they didn't want to celebrate. They didn't want to talk about it. So I felt that's important to share. But the other reason that they're able to persist were their personal supports. Most of it was family, friends, but for one person, it was her coworkers or their academic planning coordinator, because they felt like that person was their cheerleader, their advocate. And that sense of pride, we're just talking about the shame. I'm going to flip it and talk about pride, because you'll see as I get through some of these quotes. The first one is on the right, talks about the people you work with. Having the support from both the people you work with and the institution was enough for her. The next one talked about her daughter. And this was really cool because she thought her daughter wouldn't think it's any big thing. She resented her mom's time going to school when instead they could have been doing other things together. But she's excited for it. She wanted to go because she's really proud of what I did, she said. So the other thing is her daughter sits next to her in some of the classes, watches the videos at the beginning of the class, learns stuff from it, and even started to do things with mom. So one of the e-portfolios had a website, and so her daughter is creating her own website. So it was a way that she and her daughter somehow were able to interact with each other. And I'm sure, think about that little girl and what she thinks about college right now. She herself is going to know what college looks like and be probably more apt to go to it. The one on the bottom right talked about how her husband and her daughter both have a lot going on, but she needed to talk to them and say, you need to recognize that mom has work to do outside of my job, and I need to devote a certain time. So she described how she has a sign on her door in order to get them to kind of leave her alone, right? That I need some time out for mom things. And so for adult students, a lot of times they have to not just figure out how they're going to fit it in, but also get the buy-in of their family. And that's why their personal supports are important. And on the left-hand side here in green, walking at graduation also became a surprising topic, where there were a lot of people who were saying, why would I walk the stage? I'm going to be this old person walking the stage with a bunch of young people. Why do I want to do this? It's shameful. I don't already have it. But then this person sat down and said to themselves, knock it off. People have lives. Things happen. You get through it. I'm going to walk it because I'm proud of what I did. And often we talked about, well, who are your people who are going to root for you? And you're going to see more on the other quotes. But I like the one on the bottom left that talked about, she was talking to somebody who went back to college in their 60s, and they just wanted to come back for a milestone. So there are those people who are motivated to come back because they like learning. But top left, one of this person's closest friends from high school went back to college because she was inspired by our student. She kept hearing her talk about her classes and how it was going to benefit me. And she was like, I guess if you can do it, I can do it. And then she just started chanting, that's right, you can do it, you can do it. So our students become an inspiration for other students, adult students. Children continue to be a big theme. The top right, just so they can see that dad's not giving up. I'm going to walk at graduation because I need to show my kids why I was working on things and not playing with them. I need to show them what it was for. So let's see. And in the bottom, yeah, my mother's going to lose her mind. When she sees me finally, she knows how hard I worked and everything that's gone on in my life. I had kids super young. I struggled. It's been a struggle. She needs to see it along with my children. And this one over here, this person didn't have children, but he said, my mother's evaluation of me is huge because there's going to now be a permanent element of pride. That's the pride I was getting to before that exists between me and my mother. So the conclusions of the study are that non-traditional students definitely need a fully integrated approach that understands and adapts to their entire epistemology. They apply and enroll simultaneously, as you heard me say. They've already researched fit, cost, and data benefit, cost benefit of your efforts, they are stealth shoppers of websites, which means that we as institutions need to be very, very transparent, because they're not going to inquire. They're not going to be an inquiry that our admissions office or anybody else can follow up on. They're doing it all together. They do need the institutions to meet them where they are. So they need to have a web of interconnecting supports appropriate to their need to, for example, build their confidence. There needs to be staff specializing in adult learners, and not just in one area, not just in extended learning, for example. Best practice at some of the other institutions are to have someone in financial aid, someone in the library, somebody in admissions that know about adult learners and specializes in them, that are the point person, because they don't want to have to tell their story over and over. They know they're different, but they just want to be respected for knowing that, hey, you're doing this. This is great. They need appropriate messaging. Often what goes out are blast emails. I know this from my own experience, most recently as a college student somewhere else. I got their campus lunch menu every day. And, you know, that to an adult student is kind of like, it's just a constant, it's what, that death by 1,000 cuts or something like that. They just keep getting sent a message that you're not normal. You're not like the rest of them. They also need customized career supports. So for instance, our existing people, our adults who are already in the workforce, don't need to know what a resume is. They need to know how to update it. They need to know how to use LinkedIn appropriately, maybe, or how to update their image on social media. The embarrassment about not earning the degree, we already talked about. All of them that I talked to, all 6 of them, were not inclined to walk at graduation until I said something to them about it, or I asked them the question. And by the end of each one of the questions that I asked them, all 6 of them said that they were going to walk. 3 of the 6 have walked at graduation, and I've been able to personally see them. They sit in the audience and they stare at me on the stage, and they point at me, and they have the biggest smiles. I'm getting chills, because they go like this. They're like, hey, you, like, I'm here. And they are the proudest people, and they're so excited about it. They are not embarrassed. And in part, it's to honor their own personal supporters, to allow their parents or their kids to celebrate them, and to instill their own sense of pride, because they did it over other obstacles that the other students didn't necessarily have, because they're doing it younger in life. So other than that, the case study I did is generally aligned with best practices, theory, and empirical research about serving adults and non-traditional students. Of note, nobody talked about the need for more financial pathways. I believe that's because we're a state school, and because the part-time TAP and Pell had started. But by the time I talked to these people, they'd already navigated it. So I didn't talk to the people who might have been turned away because of lack of financial pathways, for example. No one talked about childcare struggles, but they did talk about living and working with kids and having to establish something. They didn't talk about belongingness or mental health. And I didn't ask them questions about it. So if I didn't ask questions about it, I'm not sure that would normally have come up in terms of a general conversation. And finally, for leadership implications, what my study found was that serving adults, number one, is part of the founding mission of regional comprehensive universities. But number two, it takes clear vision and strategic leadership that prioritizes what they need, and that they are going to be served as well as traditional students. And third, it requires a commitment to understand and provide all the elements that are required to attract, enroll, and retain non-traditional students, because it's holistic. You can't just put up a program and expect that to be enough. It has to be at the right time. It has to be the right format. You have to have all the other supports there. And we're doing pretty good at SUNY Oswego. So IPS degree can improve, but it is working for non-traditional students, or at least the ones that I talk to. And it does align with Vision 4040 and the direction that our president has kind of plotted for us. And during the strategic planning process, it is something that we are looking at. So that's the end of my presentation. this was, if you haven't guessed already, my dissertation. So what I have on here is a link to my dissertation in case you're interested in it or having more information about it, looking at it. You can read more about what the students said. It's unidentifiable, but you can hear a lot more of their stories if you go to chapter 4 of that dissertation. And that's what I have. So I'm guessing that now is a good time to get to question and answer. Oops, stop share. And I see if anybody has any questions.